got your StitchBox, let's go ahead and open this up and talk about this project. So if you have a box that says StitchBox on the front, you are about to make a little stitching heart. And I'm going to unbox mine. When you open your box, you're going to find that there are a couple of pages here of instructions that you can follow along that will help you understand the process of making this project, okay, and packing it up. So you have your instructions. You are also going to have a little plastic baggie. And inside this baggie, there's going to be some embroidery thread. And there's also going to be a bunch of buttons and beads. These you may use, you may not. They're there just in case you feel like using them. So you have those. You're also going to have a pair of scissors to cut your embroidery thread. And you're going to have a hoop, an embroidery hoop. It's this plastic piece right here. A bit of burlap that's already pre-connected for you, should be nice and tight in the middle. And then we have this needle that's already put in the middle. Make sure you're careful not to lose our needles. This is what we're going to be stitching with. You can see the hole in the end of the needle here is called the eye of the needle, and that's what we're going to stick our thread through. All right, so I'm going to set that there and make sure it doesn't roll away. And then you also have this little helpful piece of paper that helped you get to this video tutorial. So I hope that's helpful for you guys. I'm going to shut my box because I'm going to go ahead and use the materials that I've unpacked. So the first thing in our instructions here that you're going to want to do is to unpack your box, and then you're going to want to draw a picture just using a pencil and a scrap of paper, designing what you want your artwork to look like. So in this instance here, I drew a little heart and have these little lines that I would be stitching all the way around, kind of some exciting lines, and I might do these in lots of different colors. So on your sketch, you may want to use markers or colored pencils to design out what colors you want to include. You have a lot of colors to choose from for those lines for your embroidery thread. I'm going to put these buttons aside because I'm not sure if I'm going to use those or not. But you want to take a look at the colors that you have so that you can plan with the colors that you've got. So I know that I have 2 different blues and 2 different greens, but I only have 1 red and 1 orange. So you might be able to have some variety of some colors. So take a look at what you've got before you color in your picture. So I'm going to make my heart red, and then I'm going to do all these little stitches all the way around here, different colors. Okay, so that's step 2. On step 3, you're going to thread your needle. Now this, if you have never threaded a needle, is going to require a little bit of patience. So we're going to be really kind to ourselves and patient, and I'm going to get that red thread out because that's what my first part of my project is going to be, the heart. So I've got my thread here, and I'm going to go all the way to the end. And see, I've already lost my needle. Well, let me go, oh, there it is. All right, and then I've got my needle, okay? So if we look at this instruction here, it says, put thread through the eye of the needle. So you can see this illustration has the thread coming up, and then it has this long piece hanging out down on the side, and it says pull a tail through. So we're gonna do what's called pulling a tail through. I like to twist the end of my thread a little bit to make sure it's nice and pointy, and then I'm gonna very carefully stick it through. Sometimes you can get a little bit through and then use your other finger to pull. This part that I just pulled through is going to be my tail. And I don't want to have a really short tail. I'm going to have a longer tail because that's going to help me make sure that it doesn't come undone. And we'll talk about that in just a second. So there's page 1 of our instructions. I threaded my needle. Now we're going to go to number 4, which is knotting your thread. So I'm going to put a little knot. Oops, I almost lost my tail. I'm going to put a little knot on the end of my thread here. So I've got my end, and I don't want this to be in the middle of my thread because I need this whole red thread to make my heart because that's my longest line. So I tied a little knot here. I'm not going to tie it very tight because I want my knot to be as fat as possible. I'm going to tie a second knot, and I'm going to try and move that as I tighten it so that it knots right on top of the first knot that I made. So it's going to make a fat knot. So there's 2 knots together. I'm going to make 1 more knot. Now for this, again, may take a little bit of patience, and that's okay. This may be a new skill for you if you've never tied a knot on top of a knot. You got to go real slow and kind of push it and make it go where you want it to go. And again, I'm not gonna pull super tight. So I've got my 3 knots. It's a triple knot, like triplet knot, and then I've got my tail. My thread is all the way through the eye or the hole of the needle. So that takes us through number 4. Now I'm gonna go to number 5 here, which is the step right before we start stitching onto our burlap connected to our embroidery hoop. So this says pinch the tail. So what I'm gonna do when I am stitching through on my embroidery hoop on our burlap, I don't want my needle to come unthreaded. If I pull on this long piece, that tail is gonna slide through and I'll have to rethread my needle. And that may happen a couple of times, and that's okay, but we wanna try and prevent that from happening. So when I'm holding my needle, I'm gonna make sure that I'm pinching right here so that I'm holding that tail, holding these 2 pieces of thread together so that my needle doesn't come unthreaded as I'm sewing. So I'm gonna look at my embroidery hoop here and I'm gonna plan where I wanna start. And I'm gonna start right about where you can see my finger through the bottom. That's gonna be the pointy part of my heart at the bottom. So I'm always gonna enter with my needle coming from the back. This is the back of my project and here's the front. So I'm gonna enter from the back and pull out from the front. And notice when I pull out, you're gonna see my tail come through. There's the tail right there. I'm gonna make sure that I'm pinching right here as I pull so that my needle doesn't come unthreaded. As I continue to pull, that knot is gonna get stuck on the back, okay? If I pull super hard because this is a really loose weave on our burlap, I might be able to pop that all the way through. I'm not gonna pull super hard. Now I'm gonna start drawing with my thread. I'm gonna go all the way back to the back side and pull. Okay, I made 1 little stitch here. I'm gonna keep stitching all the way around to make my heart. I'm drawing with my thread. I could do short stitches or I could do long stitches. And I'm gonna make a little bit of a gap here. Notice how I gave myself a little gap before I came out through, so there's a tiny little line. Maybe you want bigger gaps, maybe you want shorter ones, that's up to you. I'm gonna try and make all my stitches the same length. And sometimes when you pull, it gets kind of stuck on here. Don't get frustrated, just take a deep breath. So I'm gonna go ahead and keep stitching until I get all the way to the end with my heart. Going from the front to the back. And every time I pull through, I'm not pulling too hard, and I'm always pinching right here to make sure that tail doesn't come undone. Look, my tail is getting really close to the end here. I don't have much holding on, so you can always kind of pull it back down to make sure it doesn't come unthreaded. Okay, so now I'm at the last little stitch here. You always want to end on the back. So all your extra kind of ugly string parts, like your knot and the ends of your string, are going to be on the back. Okay, now I could knot these 2 little pieces together if I wanted to, but I find that the easiest way, you can either just give it a trim and let it hang. It's not really going to come undone, or sometimes it's helpful if you have a little bit of tape at home. You can just tape your extra piece down there to make sure that that thread doesn't come undone. That's probably the easiest way to make sure that that stays where it's at. Okay, so now I'm going to be repeating those first steps that we just did to make our heart, to make all my little lines all the way around like I had in my step 2 drawing, okay? Now, I'm not gonna go through and show you how to do that because you could just rewatch this video and see how to do that with each one of your colors. So I would do, any of these colors and just rethread them all and do little rainbow stitches. Now, if I wanted to, you can also color in an area by stitching across, so I could use my red thread and stitch little lines all the way down to color in an area, okay? You could make your design as complicated as possible. Mine is super simple and easy. You could even write words on it if you want to, which is kind of fun. You could spell out your name or welcome to my bedroom or anything like that. So anytime that you decide that maybe this heart isn't as big as I wanted it to be, or I've made a mistake, you can always use your scissors and just trim off that knot, or you can use your needle to kind of pull through underneath any of these stitches and pull the whole entire thing through and pull your whole thread out and start over. So this is a really great type of art for all age groups, adults and kids alike, and if you make a mistake, it's easy to fix. So the last thing that you're going to do, we'll pretend that I'm done with my project here. The last thing we're going to do is pack up our StitchBox, because you're going to need to return it to school so that another friend can use the same materials. So your embroidery, your burlap is your artwork with all your embroidery string on it, is yours to keep, but you're gonna have to return the embroidery hoop, this wooden part here. So we have this little twisty piece at the top here. So I'm gonna loosen this. So we're gonna loosen this piece here. Sometimes this piece here likes to move with it, so I'm going to hold that one, pinch that one so it stays, and then I'm just twisting this piece here. I don't want to loosen it all the way where this screw comes all the way undone, because it's kind of frustrating to get that back in there. So I'm just going to loosen it just enough, and you can see this little space here just widened as I loosened it, just so that I can slide this hoop off, and it's going to come off in two pieces. So you've got the front and then the back side. Okay, and you don't need to tighten it or reconnect it. I just need those two pieces to go back into your box. Now what you can do with this, if you have an adult at home who doesn't mind ironing your wrinkles out, you can iron this out. You could cut out your design and frame it with a picture frame and put it on a wall, or one of the things that I like to do is to use a little stick, like find a little twig in my yard and actually loop thread all the way around to have a little framing stick at the top, and then you can hang it from that stick on a wall so it has a nice natural look to it. Okay, I hope you guys had fun with your StitchBox. Here's what we're going to do before you return it. All of your extra embroidery thread and any buttons that you have left, you're welcome to use them. It's going to go into our baggie. Okay, obviously the embroidery thread that you use is yours to keep because it's attached to your artwork, but any that you have extra, would love to have that back so that somebody else can use it. And then we've got our needle, which is really easy to lose. Please don't put the needle just straight into our box here. I'd like for you to tuck that needle into my baggie here, and then I'm gonna roll this baggie, just fold it a couple of times here so that the bottom isn't hanging open. Okay, now inside my box, open my box back up here. I'm gonna leave that piece of paper in there, put my thread with my needle and any extra buttons you didn't use back into the bag, put my scissors in there and my embroidery hoop. And then lastly, if your instructions aren't too beat up, you can fold them back and put them in here, and you'll return it back to school. And I will reload it with more materials. If all the thread has been used, I'll put more thread in there and replenish any colors that you used and give it to somebody else. So I hope you guys had fun, and I hope you register for another StitchBox or another art box next month. See you later. Bye.